I don't think there's a more fascinating movie in this sequel trilogy than The Rise of Sky to me. It's got such a crazy blend of aggressive metafictional undertones, unnecessary elements, and character writing that leaves a lot to be desired, all packed into a movie that attempts to do too much all at once with very little to work with. Still, I congratulate JJ for trying. In his defense, Ryan literally threw the biggest fictional curveball at him with The Last Jedi. That movie would have left anybody in the writer's room scrambling, so I don't exactly envy JJ's position here. The pressure still must have gotten to him though, and I think that's reflected by how much this movie tries to overcompensate for The Last Jedi, obnoxiously so even. And if you know anything about this trilogy, or just looked at the thumbnail of this video, then you probably know what character specifically it's overcompensating for. I'm getting ahead of myself though, and this intro's already long enough, so...
Sith Wayfinder. They're compasses that lead the way to Exegol. To stop what we both know is coming. I need to finish what Luke started. Find Exegol. Find the Emperor.
If The Force Awakens in this film are anything to go by, then I think it's pretty safe to assume that JJ loves his plot devices, because he is back at it like a crack addict in this one. The Sith Wayfinder, which is basically just a map piece from The Force Awakens, except it's the whole map this time, is at least a little more interesting than the map piece because it's implied to be ancient technology lost to time, while it's a little disappointing that its purpose to the plot is to just be a map to a planet again. I can at least appreciate the fact that JJ tried to put more context behind the existence of this item. I mean, it's not much, but it's more than what we got in The Force Awakens. It also doesn't hurt that I'm into the concept of ancient history and technology still being useful in a more modern era of the fiction. Although, this is something I believe the Star Wars Jedi games, Survivor in particular, explore a lot more thoroughly. So while I wouldn't say the movie does a great job in making me care about that history, I still appreciate the idea. With that said, there's still a lot of things I find kind of strange about the plot. One of them, I believe, is an example of the writers not thinking hard enough about it, while another is an example of an over-reliance on its plot devices. The first one is probably my favorite plot point in the entire film, and it's when our heroes go to Kijimi. Now, if you've seen this movie, you're probably thinking I'm going to bring up 3PO's memory wipe, but no, it's actually the events before the wipe I want to talk about here. It's made pretty clear that Poe and Zorii have some unreconciled beef. She explains that this is because Poe left her in a bad way when he went to go join the Resistance. It's safe to assume that this situation is about cash, because Zorii instantly locks onto Rey, recognizing that she has a huge price on her head. But Rey's training just gave her a plus 10 stat boost to all attributes over the next 5 combat encounters, allowing her to open up a can of whoop-ass on the entire gang and leave Zorii at Saber Point. Believe it or not, this is where it actually starts to get strange for me. While on a surface level it may look like Rey has all the power here, in reality Zorii still has the most leverage. She knows Rey is going to turn her into a Force ghost because she deliberately spared the rest of her gang, and while Zorii may have jumped the gun in getting what she wants from Rey due to miscalculating just how powerful Rey is, that doesn't mean she still can't get it, because she knows Rey and her friends want something from her. So what I'm saying is, what is stopping Zorii from offering our heroes the service they need in exchange for Rey? While I'm sure Poe and especially Finn would be against this idea, if I'm to believe that Rey is as pure as the color of her tunic, then I don't really see her having a problem with this. Self-sacrifice is probably one of the greatest virtues a major Star Wars hero could have, and let's be honest, you really can't expect the audience to believe that Zorii, a character that's instantly established as a no-nonsense scoundrel who doesn't like being screwed over, is just going to roll over and accept Rey's demands simply because she likes her by way of getting her ass kicked by her.
Not that you care, but I think you're okay.
While this is a funny moment, it's not like you still can't have it and have Zorii present an actually challenging dilemma to our heroes. While this change would no doubt alter other major plot points later on, I think it's totally worth it, because it says a lot more about Rey and Zorii as characters. This brings me to my next example of the plot devices. In addition to the primary plot device of the Sith Wayfinder, the film also features a secondary plot device in the form of a runic dagger. Essentially, the dagger's primary objective is to relay the coordinates of where the Wayfinder is, but its secondary objective is to pinpoint exactly where the Wayfinder is within those coordinates. If you haven't seen this film, I promise you I'm not making this shit up. Rey is the only one in our band of heroes to figure this out, but I'm going to make the argument that this particular element is unnecessary, and not really because it's a little goofy. I actually think the idea behind it is kind of neat, but like many things in this trilogy, the execution is a little sloppy. Still, I ultimately think this element is unnecessary because I believe Rey's legacy skill makes for a more satisfying alternative. Relying on the dagger to solve the issue of knowing where to search inside the Death Star 2 wreckage more than likely means that JJ and his team couldn't come up with a way for the characters to solve this problem on their own. But this collection of characters has a pretty close to perfect toolset for it. Rey is a scavenger, not used to be. I believe it'd only be beneficial for the fiction to continue acknowledging Rey as a scavenger, because as far as this moment is concerned, this is a scavenging situation, which means it's a great opportunity to put Rey's legacy skill and knowledge to good use, in concert with Poe's leadership and Finn's history as a stormtrooper. Our heroes collectively understand that the Wayfinder is an object of interest, and if we're expected to believe that the Emperor was aware of it at the time of the battle station's destruction, then that more than likely means he kept it in a safe place on it, possibly nearby places he frequented. So that pretty much narrows it down to one option: the throne room. Maybe his sleeping quarters as well, but I imagine that's also in the same vicinity as the throne room. Still, being able to make an educated guess on where the Wayfinder is doesn't exactly help them locate that area in the wreckage. This is where Poe and Finn come in. I don't think it'd be too far-fetched for the Resistance to have access to archives of those old Death Star plans. In fact, since the Rebels did win the war, it's possible they even got their hands on the full plans of both Death Stars afterwards. All Poe has to do is request a transmission of those plans on the Falcon, then the team can search for unique features on those plans and cross-compare them with the wreckage to help them locate the throne room. I can't imagine Imperial design philosophy is that much different from First Order design philosophy, so Finn's knowledge of First Order design could prove useful here. And of course, Rey understands how to scavenge and traverse dilapidated superstructures better than anyone in this group. These three characters using their knowledge and skills in concert with each other to efficiently achieve their goal, I believe would be much more satisfying than just pulling out a protractor. Honestly, the craziest part about the dagger to me is that it implies that the Emperor foresaw his own death. Okay, I'm about to go balls deep into theory territory here, but this is just too interesting to me to not talk about, so just stay with me. Sidious had to have seen this in a vision, or else why would he go through the trouble of making a dagger with a blade that perfectly lines up with the ridgeline of the Death Star 2's wreckage and leads to an extremely important item, give it to what I can only assume is his most trusted Jedi hunter, sorry Vader, with an inscription written on it that makes it abundantly clear that the dagger would only be useful after the Death Star 2's destruction.
Only this blade tells. Only this blade tells.
The only explanation I could personally think of is that Palpatine saw all of this coming. Of course, Palpatine acts way too confidently in Return of the Jedi for this to retroactively be believable, unless he treated this as some kind of contingency plan for himself, which isn't exactly beyond Palpatine's character. But the Palpatine in this movie also doesn't really suggest that this was all part of some kind of grand scheme dating back to the events of Return of the Jedi. Sure, he may spew out some old quotes, make a goofy callback to
Order 66
by way of the First Order's name, claim that he's been messing with Kylo this entire time, and even do shit like,
"She will draw her weapon."
but none of that really means anything. The only real information we get is a vague confirmation of
somehow Palpatine returned.
Possibly by way of
cloning. Secrets only the Sith knew.
While Palpatine himself is either having second thoughts about things,
Perhaps you have betrayed me.
or surprised by what's happening.
But I erred in the Force.
So I can't really say for sure if this theory has any real merit, as dope as I think it is, because I don't believe JJ actually considered it. Overall, the Rise of Sky's plot is essentially the same plot as The Force Awakens. It just features twice as many plot devices and probably moves twice as fast. The pacing of this movie may give me an ankle breaker sometimes, but at least that means I'm engaged, which is more than I could say for The Last Jedi. Of course, this is like choosing between an alarm clock or sticking your big toe in a mousetrap to wake you up in the morning. One may be more effective, but we made the snooze button for a reason.
Wasting time if you love
Be with me. Be with me. They're not with me. Ugh.
So let's really start digging into Rey's meat. Why did I say it like that? She doesn't even have any. One complaint I've seen is that Rey, Finn, and Poe's relationship feels forced because the first two movies never developed it, ultimately suggesting that this movie shouldn't even have tried focusing on it at all. I disagree. I don't think this movie should be pigeonholed into this just because the first two movies neglected this element. A relationship can start, continue, or end during any part of a story, and while it may be a little hard to accept this trio's apparent off-screen development, I don't think that means the fiction can't or shouldn't do something with them as a collective to build on-screen development, even if it's the last film. Still, this doesn't mean that I think that on-screen development is perfect. I think it starts off well enough, but then starts to lose steam really quickly. I like the idea of Poe being upset with Rey because of how she chooses to spend her time as a resistance fighter.
You're the best fighter we have. We need you. Out there, not here.
He has a point here. Rey is the Resistance's best fighter because she's their only Force user, and years of Star Wars fiction has told us that being a Force user can potentially make you a hard carry in a fight. We just saw Kylo carry in the opening scene of this film.
You've been struck by a smooth criminal.
So why Rey apparently chooses to just sit here and train is anyone's guess. Metafictionally, I can imagine it's because JJ is attempting to make up for all the training Rey missed in The Last Jedi, which is just one of the many obnoxious responses to The Last Jedi JJ put in this movie. While I can appreciate the fiction acknowledging that it's important to show Rey doing intense training exercises, training also isn't the most important thing Rey could be doing right now. The movie makes no mistake in showing that Rey's more powerful than she's ever been, if not still a little clumsy in her execution, mostly because Kylo won't stop screwing with her. She should probably be working overtime to help keep the Resistance's operations going, not playing capture the flag. I still like all of this though because it only strengthens Poe's point. So what's the issue here? Well, what I just said, oddly enough. Rey should be working overtime as a Resistance member. Even if she isn't always on missions, there's very little reason for her not to be constantly helping out around the Resistance base. For better or worse, Rey is a multi-talented character. She's a skilled scavenger, a skilled mechanic, an impressive pilot, and an exceptionally gifted Force user. And you're telling me that the Resistance can't think of anything else for her to do besides train? I think Rey is kind of shooting herself in the foot here by not saying this to Poe, and by extension, the fiction is also shooting itself in the foot by not showing this to the audience, since I can't imagine the only thing Rey has been doing as a fully fledged Resistance member is training non-stop. Poe's argument is legit, but if you want the audience to also have sympathy for Rey here, which we know the fiction does, then I believe her argument, which she ostensibly does have, needs to be fleshed out more, which we know the fiction is capable of doing. Even despite this shortcoming, I still like the prospect that Rey and Poe's relationship presents here while Finn plays the middleman. It's just not a prospect the movie cares to make much use of, even when it gives itself every opportunity to do so. There are several moments on Persona alone where the rocky relationship between Rey and Poe could be developed. My personal favorite one has got to be the encounter with the cave creature. I like this moment a lot, and not just because Rey displays a mind-blowingly monumental power during it, although that is part of it. I like it mostly because it highlights the differences in Rey's and Poe's approaches to confrontation with things that ain't the ops. While I believe this could have been done a little better, Poe still threatening to fill the creature with plasma while Rey is attempting to show it compassion is a dichotomy I can appreciate. I just kind of wish these two characters still found a way to fight about it afterwards. While Rey did manage to solve the situation through compassion, she did so in a way that gave Poe no real idea what she was planning. Poe is the leader of this group, if at the very least through seniority, since he's the longest active Resistance member of the three. Even though Rey is wordlessly telling Poe to trust her here, there's every chance Poe can still find what Rey did to be reckless, especially since he probably doesn't even understand what she did. Poe already displayed a lack of confidence in what Rey was doing in the moment, which is why Finn had to talk him down.
I'm gonna blast it. Don't blast it.
So blind trust doesn't seem like something that's going to make Poe feel any better at this juncture of his relationship with her, despite the fact that she solved things amicably. Regardless, I do like this moment, and it's not even really the biggest missed opportunity on this planet. I just wanted to talk about it.
Gotcha, bitch!
I'm sorry, I had to do it to you. I think the actual biggest missed opportunity is Rey choosing to go out to the middle of the desert to confront Kylo, which is what subsequently got Chewie captured. Rey fumbles the ball here pretty hard, and it starts with her not telling Finn and Poe why she needs to walk out to the middle of the desert. All she has to do is just say she can sense Kylo approaching this location, because we, as the audience, know she can, but Finn and Poe don't know that. And also explain why taking off with Kylo in pursuit isn't such a good idea, because Poe would probably make another argument out of this, which is part of where the missed opportunity is. But Rey, ostensibly, has another good case here. Taking off in an unfamiliar ship with an adept pilot hot on their heels doesn't sound like such a big brain play to me. She doesn't have to explain the details of how she knows Kylo is coming. She just needs to acknowledge that it's pretty important to tell her friends what's going on before running off by herself, even if it means beefing with Poe some more. She's already shown that she does believe in being told important information by the way she constantly grilled Poe about the spy at the start of the movie. So her not sharing important information with her friends here makes her look like a hypocrite, and that she's walking out in the middle of the desert to get Chewie captured because she wanted to flex. Again, we as the viewers know this isn't true because we know Rey isn't a very selfish or ego-driven person, but this makes her kind of look like she is, at least as far as Poe is involved, which is what matters here. On Ochi's ship, Rey is tripping about what happened on Pisana to Finn, which is good, but I don't think the entire team discusses everything they need to discuss here, which is where the other part of this missed opportunity is. Poe should be heated, specifically because of Rey. The only reason Poe isn't throwing blame onto anyone for what they believe happened to Chewie is because JJ wants this to be the moment where our heroes band together for Chewie's sake. And I'm not even saying JJ still can't have this moment. I'm just saying,
Where's the beef?
This was an astronomical screw up from Rey, not just because she's the one that shot the lightning, but because she also chose to, as far as Poe is concerned, randomly start wasting their time by walking out into the desert, which is what caused Finn to send Chewie out to get her. How is Poe, as the leader of this mission, supposed to make plays when he has a teammate that's essentially operating as a rogue agent? I believe Poe has grounds to discipline Rey here to some degree, even if she does accept that Chewie's apparent death was her fault, and that it happened because she believes she was doing what was best for the team. She still is being extremely unfair to Finn and Poe. Someone needs to tell her that to her face. There's no better character to do that right now than Poe. Finn can then play mediator again when the argument gets out of pocket, which will lead us back around to them locking in for Chewie's sake. Rey being a rogue agent doesn't end here though, obviously because the fiction doesn't actually believe she's being a rogue agent. It only continues during Chewie's rescue operation on Kylo's Star Destroyer when Rey has yet another premonition that tells her that the dagger is a necessity. While I can appreciate the fact that Rey is finally sharing information with Poe and Finn, the dagger is not more important than Chewie right now. And Rey's explanation for needing the dagger being
feeling
is not a good case for it being more important. This is non-negotiable if you ask me. Poe needs to put his foot down and tell Rey, as her leader, that Chewie needs all of them right now. Once they've freed him, then they can go get the dagger together as a team. If Rey still chooses to run off after telling her this, then Poe will pretty much have no choice but to discipline her for insubordination, which will more than likely mean disallowing her to participate any further in the mission if they survive this. If I'm to believe that Rey is a good and virtuous character though, then Poe telling her this should convince her that the dagger can wait. Rey is much too powerful of an asset for her not to be fully involved in this rescue operation. Poe should be able to assess this and tell her that she can't just keep running off whenever she has a brain blast. I haven't talked about it much in this video series, but Rey is a pretty impulsive person, especially in this movie. Poe should be challenging that impulsiveness here. And frankly, Rey just straight up owes it to Chewie because she got him captured in the first place. Also, imagine how much cooler it would look with Rey acting as a defensive anchor, deflecting blaster bolts to support Poe, Finn, and Chewie as they barrel down the hallways in this scene. I've heard complaints that this scene isn't very believable, and while pure action scenes haven't really been the focus of this series, I'd imagine this particular piece of criticism wouldn't be as loud if Rey was here serving her purpose as a hard carry. I'm mostly just advocating for the cool factor here though. Of course, this isn't what happens, because the fiction needs to dramatically reveal that Hux is the spy and Rey is a Palpatine now, and it can't really do those things if our heroes continue to move as one unit, because Rey's horsepower almost guarantees that the rest of the group won't be successfully intercepted, and Rey herself needs a reason to be temporarily cornered by Kylo. And trust me, we'll talk about Hux being a mole and Rey being a Palpatine later, but we need to discuss Rey's last couple acts of recklessness. On the ocean moon of Endor, after Rey whips out the protractor, Jannah tells our heroes that the waves are too violent to cross right now and that it's best to wait. Of course, Rey says, "Ain't nobody got time for that," and elects to cross the water by herself because she's about to crash out, or at worst is in the process of crashing out.
You are also born of the flesh pits.
Rey choosing to brave the waves by herself is just Rey doing Rey things at this point. It isn't really the interesting part about this moment. The discussion Finn and Poe have about it is what I want to talk about. It only took him about 3 to 4 instances of fuckery, but Poe is finally pissed off about Rey. I guess in a strange way, the lessons he learned from Holdo in The Last Jedi were effective. Of course, I'm pretty sure this wasn't what JJ was going for.
So, bad mood?
Me?
Him.
Always. But, you know, obviously Finn is still very forgiving of Rey's actions, and even suggests that they should go after her, which is fine, but Finn can't really defend Rey here. The fiction still tries to anyway, and in a moment that I can only describe as simpery levels over 9,000, Finn's defense is that Poe doesn't understand what Rey is going through.
You serious?
While also claiming that he does, even though Rey effectively just told him that he doesn't.
People keep telling me they know me. I'm afraid no one does.
You literally watch this nigga's dick shrink in real time afterwards. Poe has every right to be upset with Rey right now, because she's been nothing but a loose cannon that refuses to explain herself and acts like she knows better than everyone for the entire movie. Meanwhile, all Poe has been doing the entire movie is constantly giving her slack and tolerating her bullshit. Why should Poe give one brain cell of thought to Rey's personal issues when she clearly gives zero shits herself about his or Finn's issues for that matter? Look at this man. His arm is basically in a sling. Rey has barely a scratch on her pristine white booty. Rey has barely a scratch on her pristine white tunic, while Poe is busted, disheveled, and disgusted. The fiction makes it crystal clear that Rey is the last person that needs protecting. Finn should know what she's capable of because he's seen all of it firsthand. Why he feels the need to keep treating her like a damsel in distress is a question only a simp could answer, but it's a major reason why people think he's so obnoxious in this film. And then this nigga really has the nerve to play the Leia card on Poe, as if the audience is expected to believe that Leia would take Finn's side here, evidenced by Finn walking away in a triumphant manner while Poe has a look of introspection on his face. Yes, Leia is an understanding person. There ain't no way she'd think going after Rey right now is a good idea. No matter which way you slice it, Finn is being irrational here. Poe needs to tell him this if you actually want this moment to come off as genuine to the audience. This doesn't mean that Finn can't still be worried about Rey, or even that he needs to change his mind about going after her. Not that him chasing her tail even adds anything to the story anyway. But the fiction also needs to give a lot more respect to Poe's character. What's funny is that Finn doesn't even need to defend Rey here. He just needs to tell Poe how he sincerely feels about her. Something that he pretty much neglects doing for the whole movie, even as it constantly edges the audience about it.
When you were sinking in the sand, you said, I never told you.
I'll tell you later. What were you gonna tell Rey before? You still on that?
Talking with Poe here would have been the best time to say it. While it wouldn't mean that Poe has to change his mind about the situation either, it would mean that these characters finally get the opportunity to sincerely talk about someone they both care about, which I think would be a much more genuine way for these two characters to come to an understanding, instead of Finn just ignorantly telling Poe that he doesn't understand Rey enough. This is by far the biggest example of Finn being a dickhead in this trilogy, and it officially earns him the simp badge of honor for such an outstanding display of simpery. Truly a shining example that all simps should look up to. Which brings us to what I think is also Rey's biggest dickhead move in this trilogy. After her rematch with Kylo, Rey jacks his starfighter and runs off back to Ach-To with it, ignoring the fact that she basically just left Kylo stranded in the middle of the ocean, and more than likely ready to be mercilessly interrogated by her friends, which is obviously a situation the fiction doesn't bother acknowledging too much, but is really funny to think about. The reason it's Rey's biggest dickhead move is because the only other Wayfinder in the galaxy was in that TIE fighter, since Kylo destroyed the one our heroes were after, and while Rey technically didn't know that it was there, it still doesn't change the fact that if she hadn't changed her mind about becoming a hermit, off the back of her being more worried about herself than the rest of the galaxy, she would have effectively doomed the entire galaxy. When she digs it out of Kylo's ship, what she says implies that she didn't really believe that two existed.
Two were made.
But Kylo basically just told her that he has the other one.
The only way you're getting to Exegol is with me.
And even before this, Rey got a pretty good clue that Kylo was possibly in possession of it because he informs her that he's spoken to Palpatine, meaning that he's probably been to Exegol. Of course, Rey neglects to tell her friends any of this information because everything in this movie must be about solving her issues and doing it completely on her own. Actually, saving the galaxy as a team with her friends feels like more of a secondary goal for this film. Time and time again, the fiction will just neglect genuinely engaging with, or just straight up throw her friends under the bus, because it needs the audience to understand that her problems are definitively the most important aspect of this story. Nothing is more crucial than solving the metafictional mystery game of Rey's lineage. This movie is more obsessed with making sure Rey's issues are always the biggest, most important element than Randy was obsessed with his weed farm in South Park. It's just that her issues aren't really that important compared to the task at hand, which is making sure the galaxy isn't subjected to 20 more years of douchebag. Not that douchebag, this douchebag. But the reason the fiction still chooses to focus on Rey's issues so much is because Rian took the focus off of them in The Last Jedi and JJ took offense to that. I wish I didn't have to keep bringing up the possible metafictional reasons for things in this movie, but I can't really rationalize it any other way. Like, yeah, Rey is the main character, but the fiction explicitly goes out of its way to treat her as if she's the only character that matters at all. It's hard for me to interpret this as anything other than an aggressive overcorrection from the writer, especially when considering all the other meta jabs the movie features. Still, let's keep focusing on the fiction as we continue. Kylo's depiction in this movie is a mixed bag for me. For the majority of it, he mostly just serves as a vehicle to deliver the narrative of Rey's origins to her, ultimately revealing that she's a Palpatine. This is something I personally think he didn't need to do, as this reveal could have just came from Palpatine himself during the final battle. Plus, Kylo already tried this manipulation tactic on her, which is attempting to influence her through the idea of her lineage, or lack thereof. He makes no mistake in telling her what he's going to do.
When I offer you my hand again, you'll take it.
Basically saying that he's going to manipulate her again, and she's going to like it this time. But the math hasn't really changed here. He's just added a couple more elements to the equation. So what makes him think that this tactic would work on her again? Sure, it probably is a huge shock to find out that you're related to one of the evilest dudes to ever live, and that he also effectively gave your parents the kibosh, so maybe that's all that really matters. The fiction certainly believes that's all that matters. I guess I'm just wondering where Kylo's confidence in this situation is coming from. Then again, it's not like he's a stranger to hubristic, delusional behavior either. So he really must just believe that Rey doesn't have a choice in being what she is, simply because he believes he didn't have a choice in being what he is. I do like this idea, but it hinges on whether or not the film actually acknowledges this as his character's core issue, which means we have to look at how his redemption plays out. The most important part about his redemption we really need to discuss is the conversation he has with his memory dad. Unfortunately, it doesn't really tell us much. It's mostly just generic Star Wars mysticism babble. Neither of them really says anything specific about what Ben is going through right now. The closest we get is when Ben expresses concern about Leia's death, but that only really tells us that he regrets the fact that his mom just died for his sake. It doesn't really tell us whether or not he ever believed he had a choice in deciding what kind of person he is. And since the rest of the conversation is just Han reassuring his son that he's always been a good person, capped off with Ben reiterating the same words he told his dad in The Force Awakens, I can't really say for sure if this idea I have about his character in this film is valid. I feel like if this is something the writers actually believed about Ben, that he's a victim of cruel and unyielding destiny, then he would have had these characters talk about it here, because I don't think this is something they need to be subtle about. The otherwise generic dialogue just makes me think the writers knew Ben needed a redemption, but they weren't really sure what he needed to learn about himself to have it. I mean, I guess you could claim that what he learns about himself is that he's always been a good person deep down, but this sentiment, much like the dialogue in question, is rather generic. I feel like there's many more significant messages you could come up with for a layered character like Kylo. I suppose this is still good enough. It just means that my theory about Kylo's confidence with Rey doesn't hold much water either, which is a shame, because I think it'd be a pretty good direction for Kylo. I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments. I guess this would also be a good time to talk about the kiss as well. The most important part of this scene for Ben is the fact that he sacrificed himself for Rey using the same technique she used on him, completing his redemption. How he managed to learn this technique simply by way of having it used on him more than likely means Ben possesses the Sharingan. Yeah, I think that'd be too good to be true as well. It's probably just a dyad thing that this power comes from, which is much lamer, and is mostly about Rey anyway. The lip lock itself is also mostly about Rey as well. As someone who identifies as a Finn x Rey supporter, I can't really say in good faith that I'm a huge fan of this moment, but Finn did effectively lose some interest in Rey in The Last Jedi, and Rey took note of that. This, in combination with the fact that Finn is too scared to tell Rey how he really feels, means that I can't be too upset with Rey for choosing to look for love elsewhere. While I wouldn't necessarily say that Ben is a better match for Rey, he is, realistically, the only other option for her. I can only really say that because of how The Last Jedi smashed them together, and how this movie chose to build upon that. These two are basically secret best friends at this point. Rey has definitely shared more about herself with Kylo than she's ever chosen to share with Finn. Of course, none of this really matters because Ben dies anyway, meaning that our main character is still technically single. Yeah, it's a cop-out, but it's still probably the best outcome if you're going to undercut a romance that was set up all the way back in the first movie. Rey still finds love, albeit very briefly, and no one really has to be upset about her being with the wrong guy. I'm sorry, this section was about Kylo, right? Well, that's essentially all I had to say about him. I guess I'm a little disappointed that we only get one conniption from him this time around, and I don't really believe him throwing away his lightsaber has any real significance, outside of giving Rey the opportunity to hand him his grandfather's during the final battle. Him being a dyad with Rey only retroactively explains why he keeps having force bonds with her at best, but that's about it. Kylo isn't as much a character as he is a means to an end to service Rey, much like most of the other characters in this movie. So yeah, this version of Kylo, not really my favorite in the trilogy. But hey, I like the rebuilt mask. Even if it is just another response to The Last Jedi, it still does look pretty badass.
About my appearance, General Hux.
About the mask? No, sir. Well done. I like it.
Okay, let's take a step back from talking about Rey so much and discuss one of the few elements in this movie that isn't heavily influenced by her. The First Order is basically a shell of what it could have been at this point. Ryan literally sent Phasma to hell in The Last Jedi. The brainwashing thing is, at best, only mentioned in passing between Finn and Janna. And I still don't think JJ really believes the First Order is an Axis power, even if he does acknowledge that the destruction of Starkiller Base was a huge hit to their resources, which just feels like another response to Ryan not acknowledging it in The Last Jedi. JJ still chooses to roll with the idea that the Resistance has no allies, at least until the end of the flick. On the flip side, the First Order is still just as goofy and cartoonish as it ever has been in this movie.
They fly now! They fly now!
I think that's been the most consistent thing about the First Order throughout this entire trilogy. They're an organization of clowns. I don't think anyone represents that better than our boy Cliff Huxtable. So we need to talk about the spy shenanigans. Hux being a spy isn't totally out of the realm of possibility. I just don't believe he was a spy in either of the first two movies, nor do I really believe him being one is necessary. it's only somewhat plausible that Hux made the decision to become a spy between the events of The Last Jedi and Rise of Sky. The reason why I personally don't find this convincing either, though, is because this is an incredibly risky move for Hux to make. He doesn't exactly strike me as a person who sees the value in making risky moves. I really don't care how much he hates Kylo, I'm positive he loves himself more. This is the same guy that made the decision to blow up the Republic from the safety of a mega weapon and sit back and kick his feet up when giving chase to the rebels. So why the hell would he stick his neck out for the rebels over something so petty? Sure, his ultimate goal of becoming Supreme Leader may have been dashed by Kylo, which is what I believe this scene in The Last Jedi is about, but Hux is very clearly still on the winning team here. If he really wants to usurp Kylo, he should be targeting him specifically, which is basically what he's been doing for the majority of the trilogy, not feeding the Resistance vital information. Even if his hatred of Kylo truly burns hotter than a neutron star, how does sabotaging the rest of the First Order get him closer to achieving his goal? There are plenty of convincing arguments you can make to the top brass for why Kylo might be an incompetent leader. He unnecessarily captured and tortured a scavenger girl, let that same scavenger girl escape when she was his responsibility, captured that same scavenger girl again, just for her to escape again when she was his responsibility, held back his entire front line so he could 1v1 a Force dummy of Luke, thus allowing what's left of the Resistance to escape. And those are just the examples I could think of that Hux would actually be aware of. Seriously, what does he have to be afraid of at this point? If Kylo really wanted to turn him into a Force ghost, he would have done it already. Yet here he is, still sitting amongst the First Order's top officials, meaning his opinion is still valued in this regime for some reason, which is something he could still take advantage of. Instead, he chooses to risk his skin doing something that sabotages the entirety of the First Order in pursuit of screwing over one guy. Hux probably should have died in The Last Jedi, or at the very least before the events of this movie. He didn't need to be a spy because the info the Resistance received at the start of this movie could have been obtained from their own spies, and Hux's reason for becoming a spy is something he could still be doing regardless of being one. This moment didn't need to happen, and the only reason it does is because Rey was being selfish. Rise of Sky in a nutshell. It is literally impossible to talk about anything in this movie without mentioning Rey. So I hope you enjoyed this short break from her, because we're about to dive right back into her. Not like
Jedi's weapon deserves more respect.
So let's talk a little more about why Rey returns to Ach-To. The movie tells us that it's because Rey is scared of being a Palpatine and doesn't want to face her grandfather. While this is a pretty selfish reason to put the entire galaxy in jeopardy, it's not like Luke was being any less selfish in The Last Jedi, which he does acknowledge here.
I was wrong.
And in Rey's defense, I think she has more legitimate reasons to be scared of facing her grandfather than Luke had to be scared of facing his nephew. But my question is, why is Rey isolating herself on Ach-To necessary? The reason Luke became a hermit in The Last Jedi was painfully obvious to Rey. So why would she think it's a good idea now to do the same thing Luke did for the exact same reasons? Once again, we can reasonably surmise that it's metafictionally because JJ was salty about Ryan stealing Rey's lowest point moment from him. But if the audience is expected to believe that The Last Jedi is canon to this trilogy, then Rey should already know that this is a stupid idea. I don't think you really have enough time to convincingly bring Rey to her emotionally lowest point, about essentially the same shit as The Last Jedi, and have her convincingly recover from it all in the same movie, because Ryan didn't have enough time to convincingly do it either. This doesn't mean that she can't be scared and confused about what she's experienced so far in the movie, but consciously choosing to make the same mistake that she was just vehemently against in The Last Jedi is just doing too much. Ironically enough, this all comes back to what I said about Kylo at the start of his section, that he doesn't need to reveal to Rey that she's a Palpatine. Rey only makes this pit stop in Misery Land because of this information, but this pit stop is unnecessary because this revelation doesn't need to be that early. I'll reiterate that it doesn't mean that Rey can't still be concerned about what's going on with her. It just means that the major explanation for why all of this stuff is happening to her comes straight from the horse's mouth instead, which I believe would be more appropriate. What reason would Palpatine even have to tell Kylo anything about Rey that he doesn't already know anyway? At best, it might give Kylo an idea of what Rey's limits are, but since he also realistically doesn't know what Palpatine's limits are, and neither does Rey herself about her own limits, I'm not really sure how helpful this information is in allowing Kylo to remove Rey's soul from her body faster. And, as I've also explained, Kylo has already tried and failed to manipulate Rey through her lineage, so I'm also not sure why JJ thought it'd be a good idea to just have him do it again, outside of reinforcing the fact that Kylo was a delusional character. Which, if that's truly the case, then why would Palpatine even trust his dumbass with any kind of information to do anything right? Especially since he's apparently been
every voice
you have ever heard inside your head
this whole time. This section kinda got away from me, but you get the point. It all comes back to Rey. All she really needed on Ach-To was reassurance and advice. That's it. She could get that reassurance from her friends and the rest of the Resistance, while I'm sure it wouldn't have been beyond JJ to just plop Luke down right next to her at the Resistance camp instead for that advice. She really doesn't need to be this dramatic about her personal issues, especially if you save the movie's major revelation till the end. I cannot, for the life of me, think of one good reason as to why being this heavy-handed about Rey's issues is beneficial for the fiction at this juncture. I just feel like there's so many other ways you could have done this more efficiently, while still keeping just about everything JJ wants here, except maybe Leia's lightsaber, which only really serves as a symbolic item at the very end of the movie. While I haven't really talked about lightsaber symbolism very much in this video series, let's be honest, it's not that important, despite how much Ryan and JJ wants it to be. I think there are other, more important elements the fiction could be focusing on, but since Rey is the most important one to this movie, I guess those other elements aren't really worth considering. Now, despite everything we've gone over, talking about Rey has still probably been one of my favorite parts of doing this series. Not necessarily because she's just that interesting of a character, but because I genuinely like Rey's character concept. Not the special bloodline stuff, but the idea that she's exceptionally gifted. From Sasuke and Naruto to Azula or Toph in Avatar, I've always enjoyed the idea of exceptionally gifted characters. The idea of what it means to be talented, to be a genius at your craft, is interesting to me. And it's something I firmly believe Rey had the opportunity to explore more than anything in this trilogy. For better or worse, she is a genius level Force user. There's no two ways about it. I don't think this alone makes her a terrible character. It's how you use this idea that makes or breaks her. I don't know if JJ made Rey a genius because he genuinely wanted to explore the concept of being a genius in this universe, or because he just thought that Rey being a genius would be cool. Rey being a genius is cool, but just being a genius isn't enough. You still need to show how being a genius affects her as a character. And simply placing the entire load of Rey's character on the shoulders of her parents in an attempt to satisfactorily explain why she's a genius later on also isn't enough, because you can't really expect the audience to even accept that she's a legitimate genius without giving her roadblocks that truly challenges her genius. This is mainly where her Mary Sue criticisms come from. Rey is an extremely talented character, but the fiction rarely ever seems concerned with making her talent seem like a bad thing, and the rare moments when it does is usually just an excuse for the fiction to wax on about her parents or bloodline again. It's never really about how being a talented character negatively affects the people around her or effectively makes her a worse person. It's never about how the pressure of people always expecting greatness out of her affects her psychologically. It's never about her making genuinely significant mistakes as she sharpens that talent. That talent is only about her bloodline. That's what I think is the most disappointing part about Rey in this trilogy, and why her being a Palpatine or a dyad doesn't mean anything to me. Rey could be the granddaughter of Jesus himself and I still wouldn't give a shit, because Rey's bloodline isn't what makes Rey special to me. What could have made her special to me is the fiction taking the time to actually explore what it means to be an exceptionally talented person. Instead, all we got was Grand Palpy, a rushed identity crisis, and
Rise of Skywalker.
Still, this is apparently what JJ wanted from Rey. I can't blame him too much for attempting to right the ship after Ryan tried to run it aground in The Last Jedi. JJ essentially wanted his metafictional get back, and he got it. It just brings more credibility to the painfully obvious idea that these guys were not on the same frequency. What's funny is that they technically were on the same frequency to some degree. They both made Rey's lineage the biggest part about her character in their respective movies. They both thought that lightsabers should serve some kind of symbolic purpose. They just had different ideas on what these things should mean. JJ's vision for Rey was to eventually explain why she's so powerful through her bloodline. Meanwhile, Rian didn't really care about why Rey is so powerful. I don't think either of these approaches are necessarily wrong, but since Rian still stole the most effective opportunity to explain why Rey is so powerful in The Last Jedi anyway, JJ was left with two options. He could either abandon his original vision for Rey altogether, or move the goalpost. Obviously, he chose to move the goalpost, and as a result, The Rise of Sky ends up suffering for it. Even with this trilogy's many pitfalls, I still appreciate that it exists, mostly because it's just something to geek out about. And while you can basically say that about anything, and more than likely better things than these movies, you're not always going to be interested in something just because it's universally praised or hated. So might as well talk about it as if you have some real interest in it, because you never know who you might spark interest in by doing so. If this video did that for you in any way, then that means it served its purpose. And that you're a huge nerd if you made it this far.